Hi, I'm a soft skills trainer from the Department of Career Planning and Development, and today you're going to be learning about dangling modifiers. Now, dangling modifiers, as it is very clear to you, it is made from two different terms together, dangling plus modifiers. So, let us first understand what modifiers are basically. Now, modifier in a term is basically means at a word or a phrase in a sentence that describes another word or phrase in a sentence. Okay, so let's take an example. So over here, the example written is, this is a red ball. So red over here is a modifier as it is describing another word, another noun that is present in the sentence. Okay, so basically they are going to be explaining, they are going to be giving more information regarding the nouns or the pronouns or the verbs that are present in the sentences. Okay, there are two different types of modifiers. One type of modifier is adjective, another is adverb. Okay, if in your sentence the modifier is modifying a noun or a pronoun, so then it is going to be an adjective modifier. But on the other hand, if the modifier is working, is modifying a verb, another adjective or an adverb in the sentence, so then that is taken as adverb modifier. Let us take some more reference. Let us understand more about adjectives as modifiers. Now there are two different, further it is again divided into two different categories. One is a single word, another one is the phrase. So phrase is normally the group of two or more than two words altogether, so that is a phrase. Okay, so in the first one, in the single word adjective, the first example written over here is small mackerel. So mackerel, the mackerel is the noun over here, and the word small is the word that is suggesting about, it is describing what kind of mackerel it is. Okay, so since it is working on a noun, so that is why it is regarded as an adjective modifier. Okay, in the next, that is the demonstrative determiner is used because that is there in the sentence. After that, the definite article the is used, and the last one is a quantifier, that it is telling about the quantity, that one professor is there. If you're going to understand, if you're going to notice, so then all of these examples includes noun. The modifier is describing noun, so that is why it is an adjective modifier. In the next type, that is phrase. So if you're going to see that the phrase is an extremely small or in the corner, they are again talking about a noun, so it is taken as adjectival phrase modifiers. Now next, coming to the adverbs part, as I've already told you that if the adverbs, if the modifier is going to be modifying a verb, an adjective or an adverb, so they're going to be regarded as adverbs modifier. So over here again, we have divided into two different categories. One is the single word and another one is the phrase one. Okay, now single one in the modifier is again, it is like the sentence over here is, he plays nicely. So nicely is a word that is used to describe a verb that is playing, so that is why it is adverb modifier. Again, if you're going to say extremely beautiful, so beautiful is an adjective, and the word extremely is again modifying adjective, so then it is taken as adverb modifier. And coming to the phrase part, so the first sentence over here is, he plays in the corner. Okay, so I'm going back to the adjectives as modifiers. Over here in the adjectival phrase, the second sentence says mouse in the corner. So phrase in the corner over here and phrase in the corner, they both are same phrases, but then the difference is, in this particular example it is talking about the noun, and over here it is referring to the verb, it is modifying a verb. That is why this is a major difference. There it is an adjective phrasal. Over here it is an adverbial phrase. Okay, now moving forward to the main concept that we need to understand over here is of dangling modifiers. So the literal meaning of the term dangling is hanging off the cliff. Okay, now what does exactly we understand? Like I have already told you that modifier is a word that modifies, that describes, that provide information about other words or phrases in the sentence. So over here dangling means that rather than describing the exact thing that is referred in the main clause, it describes some other noun or phrase in the sentence. So it is going to be more clear to you if you're going to be looking forward to this particular example. So the example says, having read the book, the film will be a hit. Okay, now having read the book is the main clause over here, is the main part, the first half of the sentence. So having read the books over here, the questions that arises in our minds is, who read the book, which book? Okay, now next part is, the film will be a hit. Okay, so then the modifier is not correctly working over here. Now if you're going to see the corrected sentence, then the correct sentence is, having read the book, I think the film will be a hit. So over here, it is referring to the correct modifier. The modifier is working correctly on the other noun and verb that it needs to work upon. So then my first question that I've asked in the first part, that who read the book? So over here, the answer to that particular question is clear, that having read the book, I think the film will be a hit. Now it is the meaning of the sentences coming across very beautifully. Okay, so this is basically the concept of dangling modifiers. Now these are the certain characteristics of dangling modifiers. If you'll be able to identify them in your sentence, so then you'll be able to know that yes, these are the examples. Here the dangling modifiers are there in your sentences, and it is very, very common. Dangling modifiers are very common in your written as well as in your verbal English language. Okay, so don't worry. You can very easily solve them. You can very easily identify them, and you can easily solve them as well. Okay. Now, the first thing is, they often have an ing word gerund or two plus verb infinitive phrase in the start of the sentence. Like, for example, after reading the original study, the article remains unconvincing. Okay, now the over here, after reading the original story, again it is dangling because a ing plus gerund is there, so reading is working as a noun over here. Okay, plus it is not referring to who read the book, who read the study, when it was written. Okay, so then it becomes an example of dangling modifier. Okay, next, how you're going to identify, another tip that you have is, they most frequently occur at the beginning of the sentences. The problem is there in the starting of the sentences itself. Okay, the experiment was a failure, not having studied the lab manual carefully. Now the second half is very clear, that not having studied the lab manual carefully is correct. Okay, the experiment was a failure. Now there's no lack of information, that who, what experiment was there, who was performing this experiment, whose experiment was a failure. Okay, so these are the things that if you're going to keep in your mind, so then you're able to recognize what are the dangling modifiers, what are the examples of dangling modifiers are there in your sentences. Okay, now coming to that, we know what are what are dangling modifiers, how to recognize them, how to characterize them in the sentence, and now we are going to understand that what are the solutions, what are the methods that we have to fix all these dangling modifiers. Okay, it's not that you have identified and then you're just going to not just going to like keep it at bay, you're not going to understand or you're not going to work upon it. No, You have different solutions. You have different methods to work upon them and solve them and correct them as well. Okay. Now, the first one is revise the main clause. Now, main clause of a sentence is basically it includes the subject and the predicate. It includes the noun or the pronoun, plus it has the verb itself. Okay. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to leave the modifier part as it is, and we are just going to rewrite the main clause so that it makes more sense and it becomes a corrected sentence. Okay. Now, in the example, you can see, having injured his dominant hand, it was difficult to write the exam. Okay. Now, over here in the main clause, it is some things that are something that is kind of a then that if having injured his dominant hand, so we can make out that we are talking about some person. Okay. It was difficult to write the exam. So where who it was difficult for whom, so then that is not clear. So then we are just going to add the noun over there. We're just going to modify the main clause. Having injured his dominant hand, John had difficulty writing the exam. Now it has become the clear part. Okay, the sentence has corrected. Okay, the sentence is here is in the correct form. Next method is revise the modifier phrase. Now over here we're just going to leave the main clause as it is, and we're going to work on the introductory phrase. Okay, we're just going to include the subject in the introductory phrase. How we are going to do that? Again, taking the same example, having injured his dominant hand, it was difficult to write the exam. Over here, we are just going to leave the we are just going to leave the main clause as it is. We are just going to work on the modifier. So the way we had worked is, because John had injured his dominant hand, it was difficult to write the exam. Over here, we had added John in the modifier part. Okay, two different parts are there. So either you can work on the modifier or you can change the main clause. Okay, that is, there are two different methods. Now for your understanding, there are certain more examples to make it more clear to you. Now, the first sentence is, while driving to work, a car accident caused a traffic jam on the highway. So, we are working on the first part, that is, while Jane was driving to work. Now, over here, the person was missing, that who was driving. So, then we had added that person. So, while Jane was driving to work, a car accident caused a traffic jam on the highway. Now, is it clear? Okay, moving forward to the next sentence. Requiring more data for the study, questionnaires were collected from an additional 200 people. Now again, the second part, that is questionnaires were collected, is correct. Okay, you don't need to change anything. Now we had just changed the first half because we required more data. Now we had added a reason that why the data was required, why the questionnaires were collected, because we required more data. Okay, now the last sentence is, taking down the cellar, the darkness obscured the details of the room. Okay, now we have changed in a way, as he was taken down to the cellar. Now, who was taken down? It was unclear. So then we have just added the noun. Now, as he was taken down to the cellar, the darkness obscured the details of the room. Now, this is how we had changed the dangling sentence, a dangling modified uncorrected sentence into the corrected one. Okay, now please revise all the rules again. Understand what are dangling, what are modifiers first, how do they work, what are dangling modifiers, what characters is, how you're going to recognize them in the sentences, and after that, what are the methods that you can apply to correct them. Please practice more. Thank you.